Oh, this session is going to look a little different. You may need to configure yourselves in groups of 4 or 5 to work on this. We are actually going to go through this process of designing tasks through which students can demonstrate learning. We are going to focus on generally tasks that are associated with complex learning outcomes. Complex learning outcomes are almost always at the analyze, evaluate, and or create levels. And so we're going to work on those. Typically, the work products that students generate from that are complex, and we need to know how those are going to be evaluated. So while setting learning outcomes is a great point for starting your expectations, particularly when you come to complex learning outcomes, the complex learning outcome anticipates the generation of a fairly complex work product on the part of students. And so a lot more work needs to go into the design of how that learning outcome is going to be assessed and so forth. And so that's what we're going to look at. Okay? We're going to hearken back to this thing. So this morning we looked at articulating envisioned student learning. So for complex learning outcomes, a challenge is to actually design a task that then can give you something with which you can evaluate that learning outcome. And then we have to then do the third step. Again, steps 1, 2, and 3 are often done before class begins. So this is where we are. So what I need from you is I need some examples of complex learning outcomes. Now, we're going to face a problem. I'm going to ask you to work with 3 or 4 other people. Typically, given the range of people in the room, you're going to come from different disciplines. And people, when they work from different disciplines and we're asked to generate a learning outcome, they face a question of, well, which discipline are we going to talk about? And everybody's answer is mine. Okay, that usually leads to no progress, so I don't know how you're going to do that. But I'd like for you in groups of 4 or 5 to generate a complex learning outcome that you think would be appropriate for generally a junior or senior class. Questions about the assignment? Yes, sir.
We don't want to give an example. Get us started. We won't copy it.
You say you won't copy it, but I'm pretty sure that you would.
Second question.
Yes.
What do you mean by envisioned here?
So envisioned is
a vision of it.
A vision of, this is where I want to be. Expectations. So first task, get in groups of 4 or 5.
And you insist on groups.
Well, I don't insist on groups. But if one person gives me their learning outcome, I'm going to throw it away.
Two is okay.
If 2 people give me their learning outcome, I'm going to throw it away. Because the learning outcome should come from a group of 4 or 5. Stand. I don't.
Can you do it outside? On the table.
I just need to. You can go. I don't care. I just need the learning outcome in about 5 minutes. You want 10? You want 10 minutes? 10 minutes.
We have the time, yes.
10 minutes. I don't care where you sit and talk. I need a complex learning outcome written down on a piece of paper in 10 minutes. Okay, I don't care how you group yourselves physically. By the way, you should know the research says that the best way to conduct a meeting is a standing meeting, because then people are reluctant to kind of stand for a long period of time. But I need each group of 4 or 5 people to give me a complex learning outcome written down on a piece of paper in 10 minutes. And you have 9 minutes and 30 seconds left. It should be at the analyze, evaluate, or create level, not at the apply, remember. You're not going to get complex learning outcomes at those levels. Okay, here's what people came up with. The first one actually is a complex learning outcome because it asks for the design of an experiment. If we were to work on that, lots of people would have to know about measuring doping density in semiconductors. And I'm not sure that a lot of people know about measuring doping density in semiconductors. So it's a good complex learning outcome, but it may not be the one to work on. Given a matrix, second one, given a matrix, perform a principal component analysis. The verb in there is perform. Where you see a verb perform, you're typically looking at an understand or apply level. Doing a principal component analysis for a matrix is a pretty straightforward computation, so it's really not a complex learning outcome. Assessment of air quality, ability to manage remedial measures has no verb in it, so it's not a complex learning outcome. Identify region-specific renewable energy schemes. Not sure what an energy scheme is, but that shows some promise but on the other hand, all we have to do is come up with schemes. Now, if we were supposed to evaluate a set of schemes, that might be pretty complex, but just identify means here's one, here's another one, here's another one. That's not a very complex learning outcome. Analyze, evaluate the design of a drainage system for Mumbai. That's a good one to work on in a particular class where you have a drainage system to work on. Okay? So if you could give the class a drainage system, they could go ahead and analyze it. But we don't have a draining system to work on. Mini product on a real world problem. Mini project. So that doesn't really have a verb in there. I'm not sure what we're actually looking for in terms of a learning outcome for the mini project. There's a lot of complexity there. I'm assuming people know that this is a lake okay. And so if we had something like develop or design an approach to clean up the lake, then that would be a learning outcome. But at the moment, we have a nice setting for a learning outcome, but we haven't, because we could either design a scheme to clean up thing, we could evaluate a given scheme to clean up things, or we could actually develop a map of all of the factors that would be considered in designing a cleanup scheme. Right? Excuse me?
Cleanup strategy will be all right. Cleanup strategy.
Design a cleanup strategy? Yes. I mean, it needs a verb in there.
That's what we mean.
Oh, that's what you mean, even though that's not what you wrote down.
Correct. Yes,
so we're in. Okay. So, and the last one is evaluate hydrocarbon potential of kerogen in different plate tectonic scenarios. Again, that to me is a great. That one would be an interesting learning outcome in that course. However, as something for us to work on, would be pretty hard. So why don't we go with this one, which is, okay, so that could be a complex learning outcome, at least the second part. And that seems to be something that a lot of people in the room could go to work on. So let's suppose that that is the learning outcome. Now we're going to encounter a problem that I always have with faculty members when we do this step here. Remember that the step is, now that we have a learning outcome, now I want you to design a task through which the students would demonstrate their achievement of the learning outcome. Now, people say, well, isn't this the task? Well, let me think about that. Suppose I was actually in a course where I would be, and that was a learning outcome in the course. And I mean, would you give an assignment to the students that says, develop a cleanup strategy for the lake. I'm thinking you wouldn't do that. I'm thinking there would be, some context, there would be some description, there would be some elements that what's expected to be in that strategy, what are the things that I would be looking for. So your next task is to do what's necessary. Take that learning outcome and design an assignment, if you will, that you would give to the students through which their achievement of this learning outcome would be evaluated. Okay? Now would be the question for, now would be time for questions. Where are people not clear about what they need to do? Yes, sir.
In my own experience, I have found it's very important to be extremely specific about explaining the problem. The wording has to be very, very precise.
Good.
Otherwise, so in this case, design a cleanup strategy is a very broad statement. The problem statement is very broad. You haven't defined to begin with. Have you specified that the Powai Lake is dirty to begin with?
So the learning outcome is not excessively broad.
Okay.
The task has not been defined. The assignment that we're going to give to students has not been refined sufficiently, so it's in a position to give as an assignment. That's a good learning outcome, but it's not a good assignment. So your job is to take the assignment and to do exactly what you're saying, is to produce an assignment of the quality and clarity that's required for us to give it to the students and to be clear about what we're asking for.
Okay.
So this is the learning outcome. The learning outcome is not the assignment that you give to the students. It says, matter of fact, you don't even have to specify the lake, Design a cleanup strategy for some lake. Now in the assignment, now we got to get down to specifics. What do I mean by a cleanup strategy? Which lake are we talking about? How long should what's the implementation time frame? Because the cleanup strategy would look differently if I'm trying to get it done in 6 months or if I'm trying to get it done in 3 years. So now I need an assignment written out with sufficient detail that provides the clarity that you've indicated that I can give to students. Is that? Okay, that's what I need. Question, or is this just hair fluffing?
So,
okay.
I actually have a point that even this learning outcome is more like an assignment. I would say an actual learning outcome would be design cleanup strategy for lakes.
Yeah, I just said that.
Yeah. So at the end, the student should be able to design it for any lake, not just for a lake.
Yeah, okay. Now, we don't need to refine the. Yeah.
One assignment could be identify pollutants in.
Let me be clear. The assignment will be executed by the group, so I don't need an assignment from you at the moment.
Okay.
I need your group to develop the assignment. What I want to make sure is are you clear about what I'm asking you to do? Yes, sir.
So, question regarding your assignment: do we need to assume this learning outcome to be a part of a particular course, or do we have?
Yes.
So, which course? I mean,
hydrophonics. It's a course on lake cleanup.
okay.
Some people that work in water or whatever would be able to refine a course. We could call it a course on environmental design. Yes.
So, Jeff, could it be a sequence of tasks so it kind of leads them to that point?
So if you think that specification would be necessary in the assignment that you give to the students, please include that. So I'd like for you to go to work on the assignment. Make sure you get a piece of paper and you have time to work on it. Is that it becomes easier for you to grade. You always know where to look for to see if the section is there. So 2, it gives them some sort of sense that a professional report would include these things. And so you've helped them to say, look, you've got to think about a bunch of things that should be in there. Now, I'm not going to go through, looking at what you've submitted, I think there are a number of things. I would say that one of the things that's not in there is, and there will probably be other sections as well. But that's kind of how an assignment would look. Now, you want to distinguish between the assignment that they're going to submit and then things that you would do to provide instructional support for them. So, for example, somewhere along the way, you may say, oh, if I want them to do an analysis, I may have to provide them some information on how to do some of that analysis. That would be part of your instructional strategy. That would not be part of what's in the report. You just say, I want to see the analysis, but I realize that in order for you to do the analysis, one of the things that I'm going to have to do is probably do some instruction on how to do that. Okay? So I'm hoping that this provides you an idea of when you craft a learning outcome and then you turn that into an assignment, the level of detail that goes into designing the assignment. Okay? The level of detail is important for several reasons. One, it makes sure that all of the things that you want the students to tackle, they're shown that they should be responsible for in the report. 2, you have organized it into things that make it likely that you are going to know where to look for in each thing, so it would be easier to look for. If you just said, I need to see an identification, I need to see a classification, I need to see a timeline, you might get those in any kind of random order, and then it becomes a lot harder work for you to do. 3, now, suppose they were turning these in. They were going to turn them in. This is an example of a product for which you would want a rubric, because there are lots of different things that you'll be looking for, and you would, if you laid those out and said, I will be looking for all of these things, and here is basically a poor level, and here is a good level, and here's a moderate level of thing, that would provide them clarity in terms of, oh, they're going to be looking for this. They're obviously going to be looking for those sections, but if they're going to be looking for this, this is what really good looks like, this is what really poor looks like, and this is what somewhat in between looks like. Okay. So I want you to work on the rubric. I want you to spend the next time thinking, what are all of the characteristics, or what are some of the characteristics that I'm going to be looking for in the report, in the reports? So what are the characteristics that you're going to be looking for? And then if you generate some characteristics, then for a characteristic, then begin to think, okay, for that characteristic, what does really good look like? And part of the reason for that is that if you tell them what really good looks like, you're more likely to get that. Because students don't often, oh, that's what really good would look like. Now, when you tell them what really poor would look like, they go, oh, okay, I don't want to end up like that, so they work to avoid that. And you may say, well, I'm giving everything away. What you are giving away is your expectations, and I don't think that's giving anything away. That's just being clearer in terms of what you expect. This is why, remember, the learning outcome is develop a cleanup strategy for a fresh body of water. That can be translated into a lot of different learning assignments and things. But then once they submit that, if you're not prepared, then you're going to be sitting there looking at these reports and going, how am I going to sort through? But if you've laid out the rubric and shared it with them, people generally report that increases the quality of the reports. B, you're going to have a lot easier time grading because you're just going to say, I'm looking for this characteristic. Yep, there. Okay, and people generally report, now it takes some effort to develop the rubric, but once that's done, then it enables you to grade multiple iterations, multiple versions, multiple submissions more quickly. So, questions on the assignment. I would like for you to develop some characteristics, and then when you have a characteristic that's interesting to the group, then say, what would very good look like with respect to that characteristic, and then what would very poor look like, and what might a level in between look like. Questions on the task? Yes, sir.
Is it a good idea to show some sample assignment from last year? Of course, anonymous.
But show that this is what a good, this is what a mediocre is like. It could be a similar but not the same assignment that we are giving this year, for example.
So I generally think that giving them a concrete example of a report is a bad idea. The encouragement will be that, suppose we did last year's assignment on Clear Lake and this year's assignment on Powell Lake. You might be tempted, you might end up seeing lots of things where all that they did was take Clear Lake and replace it with Powell Lake. And I don't think you want that. Now, if you've given an assignment in the past year where they've done a cleanup on Clear Lake, then you should know that for many people, they're already in some files anyway. But I think the rubric gives you a better chance for them to exercise some variance of that. And also, if you've used a thing like turnitin.com, you can say, all of the reports last year were submitted into turnitin.com, and if your report looks too much like any one or more of those last year reports, then that's bad news for you, and that might help discourage the iterations there. But I'm not sure that showing them examples is going to get you the type of learning that you're after.
You want us to build it on these particular things?
Let's suppose that, there could be, but let's suppose that this is a good start, and that's a start of what they're going to turn in. So
vertical and then horizontal.
Yep. Show me what characteristics are you looking for, and then what does good look like, and very good look like, and what does very poor look like, and therefore what does in the middle look like. Okay? No. So, regardless of the sections, I want to know what characteristics you're going to look for. Some of the characteristics might be related to the sections, but some of them might not be. So I want to know what characteristics you're looking for, and then what does very good look like, very poor look like, and somewhere in between.
I have a question.
Yes.
So let's say if someone wants to evaluate the creativity of the report, in that case, giving out the section names in some sense gives lesser scope for giving out the section names. So perhaps one way could be to just let them decide the section names and evaluate the report based on the creativity that they have, not just in the names but in general.
So it is interesting that if you look at the research on creativity, curiously enough, providing structure to the result actually encourages creativity as opposed to discouraging it.
Okay.
So
interesting.
You shouldn't confuse variability with respect to creativity.
Okay.
So if you didn't specify the section names and order, you might get lots of variation in the report. I'm not sure that you'd get more creativity.
Okay.
Now, further, if you expected creativity in the report, let's suppose with these sections, what does creative look like for you?
That's right.
So if that's a characteristic that you're interested in, what does a very creative report look like, given the fact that I have to deal with this structure? And that might be sometimes when we say creative, we're not we say, oh, that sounds good, but then we're not clear about what it means. So when you put scale on it, then you'll be helping them to be clear about what you look for. Now, you can also do the following. You can say, if you meet all of the criteria in the rubric, that guarantees you what's the top grade in here? AA. And the next grade is AB. So if you do everything well on the rubric, then you get AB. The only way that you get an AA is to deliver something that goes beyond my expectations. Then now you've given them a chance to give them structure, and you've clearly laid out the expectations, but you've also said, in order to get the very toppest mark, I need something that goes beyond my expectations. How you deliver that, people can often come up various ways to do that. So that's another way that you can deal with that kind of thing. Yes, sir.
So, say if they were to present a table, and a lot of times there has been no opportunity to get trained as to what is a good table or what's a table that communicates well. So that could be one element of the report to say tables should be like this. If it is like this, then it's good. If not, it's not.
It could be one element of what you specify in your assignment. It could be one thing that you say, gee, if I want them to develop good tables, then I will give them some instruction on tables, and B, I will have an element in the rubric that basically a line that says quality of tables. Did everything that they're supposed to have in there, or missed just about everything and somewhere in between. So that would be another way to do that. And that might be an opportunity for you to refer to published reports, public reports or whatever, and say, look, here are examples of really good tables, but that would be part of your instructional strategy. Does that help? Okay. The same thing for graphs. It's actually harder to develop good graphs than it is good tables. But then that could be another element in your rubric, quality of graphs. Okay, go to work. What are the characteristics that you'll be looking for, and what do very good and very poor and somewhere in between look like? So, could I have your attention, please? So, many people, as far as I know, I didn't say that you would turn in one of these things. So, many people were conditioned from the past two things that they would turn one in. What I want to know is, from each group, what's a characteristic for which you provided very good, poor, or unacceptable, and average. So what's a characteristic for which you generated those? I'll start with any group that wants to volunteer.
So what one aspect?
You got to wait for the microphone.
Yeah, next.
So quality of report.
Quality of report. Okay. What would very good look like?
Compliance with the structure.
So all you're asking for is compliance with the structure.
I have graphs, tables, references also, but then I haven't specified for each one of them. But if as long as it followed the structure, I would say good or average or not acceptable.
Okay. What would unacceptable look like? Unacceptable would be really, in that case, very easy to grade. Excuse me? What would unacceptable look like in terms of quality of report?
If the submission did not follow the structure.
Okay.
Fully.
Okay, in which case, it's going back.
Yeah.
Okay? Okay, this group, what does What's the characteristic?
So it is similar to what they had, but we had some more details. So I thought we'll. So we also had this about references, figure attribution, equations, and the way it is written, not plagiarized, etc. Equations, for example, whether they are numbered, all terms explained is very good. But if they don't number or some of the terms they don't explain, it's so good. But if they don't do either, then it's very poor. Similarly, for references, there is a standard format, and if it is not in standard format,
No,
mixed
there is
format,
not a standard format. There are standard formats.
So they have to choose one,
You have to.
and then it is very good. If they mix, it is average. If they have incomplete reference, it is poor. Right?
Okay.
So like that we will write, and we had one more for data representation.
Oh,
Yeah.
Sourcing and data.
apparently nobody wants to talk.
No, so for data, we had that the source of the data is very important, which probably will come from the references that they list.
Okay.
And data representation is very important. So if the sources are cited and appear to be good sources, and data is represented preferably in terms of figures which are properly labeled, then that's very good.
Okay.
Also, the time period over which data is taken and the extent to which the types of pollutants, if they are captured.
Okay. So now we're getting, so that last point was a shift. So the first two things they raised about quality of the report could have been applied to almost any report generated.
Yeah, but now it's specific to this
now
problem.
We're beginning to get into things on this. So I want you to concentrate for the rest on characteristics that would be specific to the kind of report that they're turning in, not just to, yeah, we're supposed to have references and sections and stuff like that. So this group, what's a characteristic that you picked and what does very good, yeah, you can tell me.
So it'd be thoroughness, good detailed data,
Okay.
including comparison with other lakes.
Okay.
That would be a good representation. Then moderate would be just taking data from Google, for instance. And poor would be incorrect or unconvincing data, like lake is clean enough or things like that. That would be a poor.
Okay. Cool. What else? This group in back.
So a lot of things generic apply to any
Report. Pick something that's specific to this kind of report.
No, so one of the things that we talked about was coherence.
Quality of tables and charts.
Coherence?
Yeah.
Okay.
Something that reads well. I mean, actually is addressing the problem and talking about it.
Okay.
And I mean, if it's a report that's completely unreadable, unrelated, that's poor.
Okay.
And if it's somewhere in the middle, it's in the middle.
Okay. Okay. Coherence? Okay. What's this group?
Yeah, so we have picked the quality of data representation using charts and figures, and if we can measure that using 4 metrics. Very good if the charts and tables are easy to comprehend and contain all relevant information.
Okay.
Good if they contain information but they are not very good to understand. Average if they are not very good to understand and not contain all information. And poor is if there are not any charts and tables, the data is not presented in that form, or they are not able to be understood at all and lack all the relevant information.
Okay. Notice that what people seized on is generally content or domain non-specific stuff. That basically, if they submitted a high quality report that had nothing to do with pollution and the lake, you guys are going to grade that all good, according to the rubric that's been generated so far. At some point, you're going to need elements of the rubric that talk about, well, did they identify the pollutants and how good a job did they do? Did they have how feasible was their cleanup strategy? So, for example, if they said, we're going to drain the lake in 24 hours, you go, well, I don't think we're going to drain the lake in 24 hours. Okay. So at some point, we need to begin to look at criteria specific to the subject of the report. Now, A couple things. Generating a rubric is not a simple task. 2, one should never generate a rubric, as we tried to do here, from scratch. Rubric is a coherent set of criteria that includes descriptions of quality level. That's the definition. So, advantages of the rubric. 1, it clarifies expectations for you. You know what you're looking for and may help you in designing the instruction plan. 2, it gives very clear indication to the students about what is expected of them. And oftentimes, that will result in higher quality reports, and higher quality reports are almost easier for you to grade. 3, an advantage of the rubric is it enables peer assessment to a great degree, because if you have a well-constructed rubric, then I can take a report from one group and give it to another group and get a pretty good assessment of the thing because I have very clear criteria. Where students are generally poor at assessing another student's work is when they're just called on, when they have to generate the criteria and levels of performance implicitly in their head and generate something. They're usually pretty bad at that. But people are generally better at when they have a set of criteria and we're judging a report against a well-defined set of criteria, they do a good job. So another thing, having a rubric would allow you to have a draft of the report to be submitted, and you could arrange for the draft of the report to be evaluated by peers with feedback. And with a well-defined rubric, it's likely that the peer assessment is going to give them much better guidance and result in a much better report. So a rubric enables peer assessment. Okay. But, as I said, a rubric should not be generated from scratch. I have listed here a set of, there are lots of example rubrics out there, many of which would address the things that many people were doing in terms of quality of report. So you wouldn't have to invent those. You could just go and find one of them and say, I want to use that. Maybe with attribution would be a good idea, but so when you're going to develop a rubric, try not to do it from scratch. Try to find rubrics that are very similar to what you are looking for and use that. Lots of people have developed them, and you can borrow, you can apply other people's work to simplify your work. So, that. What I would ask your patience for, because we are at 5:32, is to get a copy of a paper, and I'd like for you to know what was clear about our work on what was helpful. So, top of the page, helpful. What was helpful about the work we did on assessment this afternoon? Turn over, muddy. What still remains as unclear or muddy for you about the work we did on assessment this afternoon? If you'd complete that and then just put that down there, that would be the last thing I'm going to ask you to do today. I thank you for your commitment, your engagement, your energy, and for what I've learned from you. Thank you very much.